Hello everyone, and welcome to our Linux only tutorial for installing Debian Chroot onto our Spotify car thing. Now, there are 3 different OSs and firmwares we're going to be taking a look at. They were outlined in our final Spotify car thing video, although 4 if you count the original premium free firmware, but we already made tutorials for that. So let's get into this thing. Before we get too far into it, just a brief disclaimer, I'm not responsible for any loss of data or breaking of your device. You're doing this at your own risk. Just like I said before, we're going to be installing Debian Chroot onto our Spotify car thing. This is more of a proof of concept rather than a functional OS, so even if you don't want to flash it onto your Spotify car thing, let's see how it works. So it doesn't matter which Linux distro you're using, we always need the same thing: a laptop, desktop, or VM running any version of Linux, the Spotify car thing, and a USB cable for it. Now that we have the hardware, let's check out software. Now, as requested, I am going to be using a virtual machine. If enough of you comment down below, I will make an in-depth tutorial and guide of how to set up a VM for your computer. For Linux, you can use Debian or you can use anything else like Ubuntu. I used Ubuntu in the past, but recently I've noticed that the Paymlboot install kind of doesn't work. So I'm just going to show for both sides. Now there are a few different variations of the Superbird tool that came out. I initially used the one from Bishop Dynamics, but 2 other variations have come about from it. Now the one I don't have any issues with is this one. And the reason is because a lot of the dump files that have been updated don't have the settings file, and you don't need to actually change the extensions of the 2 system files. So we're going to download our Superbird tool, make sure it's this one by Elmore377, and then download the firmware we want to install. Go to the mega link found in the description below. Once it loads, click on Dump Archive, and then select which firmware you want to download. You can right click and then click Download as zip. And then once it's done, go back to your downloads folder. Extract them into the same folder, just like I have here on screen. And then open up a terminal and let's install these tools. Just like before, we're gonna need Python, libusb-dev, git, adb tools, multistrap, and then we have to fix Paymlboot. Now when it comes to installing Paymlboot, unless you're using Debian, which it has been built for, you need to install it by using the same install command as we put on screen. But in this time, you need to do -- break system packages. And the reason is because this wasn't built for any other version of Linux besides Debian. So it kind of has to break the package in order for you to use it. But once you do this, Paymlboot is pretty much installed and ready to use. Now that we have installed everything, reopen the Superbird tool folder, click on the 3 dots, click open in terminal. And here's our final disclaimer. Before we get into installing the OS, I'm not responsible if you break your device. You're doing this at your own risk. Also, I will be repeating myself throughout the video that this OS is a proof of concept to show what can be done to this. It is not intended to be a usable OS. I wanted to take a moment and teach the process so we can see the possibility of other OSs using the same build process. So let's get back into it. Holding buttons 1 and 4, plug your Spotify car thing. You should hear a chime that the device connected while the screen stays off. If you're using a virtual machine, click connect to virtual machine and remember device. With this, make sure you plug into a USB port directly on your motherboard. If you're using a laptop and a USB port works fine. If USB 3.0 doesn't work, USB 2.0 works as well. It's just going to take quite longer to flash. For me, I'm unsure if it was the virtual machine, the USB cable, or both. USB 3 wasn't working correctly, so I actually spent a while using USB 2. If you have any other issues, I recommend unplugging everything except the essentials from your PC and trying again. This happens more with Windows than Linux, but better to be safe than sorry. Now that this is done, we can move on to the next steps. Type in sudo python3 superbird tool find device, and then it's not needed, but you can type in sudo python3 superbird tool enable burn mode to put into USB burn mode. Again, if you had any issues, unplug it, plug it back in, try a different USB port and USB cable. And now the device is in USB burn mode, we need to flash the firmware onto the Spotify car thing. Now the firmware you can use are any of the ones found on the Mega link. I suggest using the No Premium OS as it already bypasses the initial start and you can pretty much do whatever you want with it after. Now again, this is a proof of concept, so not everything is going to work. We just want to continue on and see what we get. So if you've already flashed your Spotify car thing with an alternative firmware, you can go ahead and skip to the next timestamp. But if you don't, cd into our Spotify car thing folder, run sudo /superburner_tool.py -- restore_device, and then the directory to that firmware. Hit the enter button and everything should flash through. If it doesn't, just make sure you're using the correct Superbird tool that we listed in the description below. And then if anything, just use a different USB cable and USB port. This is going to take a while to flash onto the Spotify car thing, so just find something else to do at the moment, and then in a couple minutes you can come back and it should be good. Alright, now that we have installed an alternative firmware onto our device, hold buttons 1 and 4 and plug it back in. Now that it's plugged in, let's just make sure everything is there. Device is in USB mode. Now cd into our Spotify car thing Debian Chroot main folder, and then just run sudo chmod a+x and *. It's going to make sure we have the correct permissions to execute any of the scripts. Then just run sudo /boot adbkernel.sh. It's pretty much just going to send the adb kernel script to our Spotify car thing, allowing us to then have the ability to boot it with adb mode. Now you don't actually have to use this script. You can use the Superbird tool boot adb kernel and then just select which boot sector to use, and then just run -- continue boot, and then it's going to boot into adb mode. Now I notice it's going to error out if one of two things happen. One, it's already booted into adb mode, and two, if it's just a faulty USB port or cable. Now it looks like it errored out, but according to this it still worked. Now if we cd back into our Superbird tool folder, run the find device, it says our potential device is not ready. Since this is the case, unplug it, hold buttons 1 and 4 and plug it back in. Now I've already booted this thing into adb mode beforehand, so if we refine the device and then just boot adb kernel, we'll pick the A partition. It's going to throw it into USB burn mode, disconnect, reconnect our device, and it's going to boot with the adb kernel. Now I know it says it's failing, but if we just continue boot now, it's going to boot up, wait for it to reconnect to our system, and then hit find device. Here we have our device booted normally with USB gadget adb USB net enabled. Now we can just type in adb devices and it's not attached. Now I'm just going to redo everything really quick as I may have missed something, or it's just my PC. Now it should be connected. We can find our device. It's booted with adb enabled, then run adb devices. Here's our device connected through adb. If your device is not popping up through adb devices, make sure you have the correct tools installed. Try a different USB cable and USB port, and make sure you actually boot through that adb kernel. Just pick a partition that you want. Always remember to do -- continue boot. The Spotify car thing should boot just sitting on that logo. If that still doesn't work, try giving your PC a restart and try again. Even if you're using a virtual machine, just reboot your entire PC. And now that we have everything set up, we can build the file system to put onto the device. So cd back into that Spotify car thing folder, do sudo /build.sh. Now, because this is more of a proof of concept, there will be some bugs in getting it to work and sometimes getting it to not work. So even though it said there was an error, this may end up working, this may not end up working. This was just, again, a proof of concept I wanted to take a look at to show where all of the other foundation of the firmwares we will be installing and see once it goes from there. Now that it's complete, we can deploy it onto the Spotify car thing. Run sudo /deploy.sh. It's going to go ahead and deploy it onto the Spotify car thing. And we just have to wait a while for this thing to push the entire file system. Now, the entire image file is going to be 1.75 gigs, leaving around 200 megabytes to spare on the partition for data. Now, the current list of packages is only around 755 megabytes, so there's some room left for anything else. This part's going to take a while, so just go watch some YouTube or something else, and then come back in like 10 minutes when it's done. Could not read from device. I'm just going to rerun this again. It seems like could just be an error in copying it, could be my USB cable, could even be the USB port. Again, this is all just a proof of concept, and even if it doesn't work, it's perfectly fine. We just wanted to see what can be done and how it actually deploys onto the Spotify car thing. Alright, so I tried a bunch of things. Seems like we're airing out copying onto the file system. If you can get it past this, all you need to do then is cd back into our main folder, run adb devices to ensure we're still in adb mode. Then run adb shell. Now that we're on the adb shell, we can stop the Superbird app by running /etc init s95 supervisor d stop. Then we'll activate our chroot. Now, again, because it didn't copy over those files, it's not finding these directories. And then we can launch Chromium by just running x init user bin Chromium and then no sandbox. If everything had copied over and the activate chroot actually went through, hitting this would boot Chromium onto the user shared doc webpage. It's going to show the shared MIME info database. Now, again, because it's a proof of concept, nothing works, no buttons, no touchscreen or anything. And if we don't permanently disable anything, just typing an exit will automatically close any chroot scripts and clean it up. But I mean, that's pretty much it. That is just the start to our different firmwares and OSs we're going to be running on the Spotify car thing to see about reviving it. If you were able to get this work, let me know down in the comment section below. So if you had any other issues besides anything we brought up in the video, let me know down in the comment section below. And hopefully this worked for you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next tutorial.